My golden brother was pampered by my parents, who allowed him to abuse me until I fled. They contacted me 7 years later and asked for my assistance. Hello everyone, prior to the start of today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Okay, Reddit. This is a 13-year journey through abuse and dysfunction in the family. It's about how my parents allowed my psychotic older brother to ruin my adolescence and how they exposed themselves when my uncle became ill. Then when they least expected it, karma gave them the ideal retribution. I'll give you a glimpse of what it was really like to grow up in my home. Ian, my 27-year-old older brother, was essentially a 6'3" sociopath with a football scholarship and no morals. He was 3 years older, had the physique of someone who could deadlift a Honda Civic, and had a predatory, dead-eyed look that made prison guards uneasy. Everyone believed the kid was the next Aaron Rodgers, even though he was actually insane. Sibling rivalry was not the cause of the abuse. Ian had made it a kind of art to torture me. Consider the case of Jessica Martinez. I had been crushing on this girl since middle school, and it took me months to get the guts to ask her to homecoming. After learning, Ian concluded that this was prime entertainment. The guy waited until the cafeteria was full for lunch, approached Jessica's table after that. "Hello, Jessica," he spoke loud enough to be heard by half the school. "Despite months of stalking, my younger brother is too cowardly to ask you out on his own. Instead, how about you go with a real man?" Jessica instantly said yes. Who wouldn't want to accompany the quarterback with the most fame? Ian looked at me as if he was staking out territory, making sure I was looking when he asked her. Then 2 days before the dance, he broke up with her and claimed she was practicing for his younger brother's leftovers. The tale circulated throughout the school. Ian had to approach girls on behalf of his pitiful younger brother, who was unable to accept rejection or the consequences. When I was a sophomore and eventually made the junior varsity basketball team, after 2 years of honing my shots in our driveway, I finally had good form, and the coach saw potential in me. On a Tuesday, I joined the team. Coach pulled me aside on Thursday morning and explained that there had been issues. Ian had persuaded him that favoritism would result from having both brothers on teams, while Ian played varsity and waved at me during timeouts with the 6 smile. Issues was cut before ever playing a game. When Ian showed up on race day with running gear for the full 3.1 miles, the psychological warfare was at an all-time high. I had spent months training for this local 5-kilometer race, running every morning before school and recording my times. Ian ran directly next to me commentating, "That's how you always breathe when you run. If you pass out, Dad will be ashamed." When the last stretch arrives, Ian rushes by me as if I'm motionless, victorious arms raised. For the next month, he told everyone that he needed to slow down so as not to cause too much embarrassment to his younger brother. Ian's damage to my confidence with women like Amy Chen was the worst. I had a girl in my AP physics class who seemed interested in discussing robotics with me. For weeks we had been studying together. Ian spent the entire time describing embarrassing things about me, like how I used to wet the bed until I was 12, and how I had never really kissed a girl, when he unexpectedly showed up for our session. Amy went from being intrigued to feeling totally uneasy. "Never again did you talk to me outside of class." The physical abuse was deliberate and ongoing. Ian knew exactly how to cause the most pain possible without leaving behind any evidence that would cause him to run afoul of college scouts or coaches. I had dry heaving from gut punches, but there was no obvious bruise. Joint locks that allowed me to see stars without causing any long-term harm. Wrestling techniques that served only as pretext for slamming my face into walls or grinding it into carpet. His favorite part of his exercise regimen was this thing he called motivation sessions down in the basement. He would use me as a practice dummy and corner me while lifting, all the while giving me psychological abuse. You understand why your father refers to you as Ian's younger brother while referring to me as his son. As I pressed my face against the exercise mat, he would say, "Since you are not worthy of being claimed." When my parents witnessed all of this, they viewed it as the result of natural selection. When I complained about having my lunch money stolen every day, my mother would say, "Ian's toughing you up. For boys to succeed, they must learn hierarchy at a young age." Even worse was Dad, who actively promoted Ian's actions as a means of developing his leadership skills. Well done on keeping him inspired. After especially harsh sessions, he would tell Ian, "Effective leaders are able to motivate their team to improve." It seemed as though we were living in a parallel universe because of how extreme the favoritism was. At 16, Ian received a brand new truck. When I asked for $5 for the bus, I was told to earn what I wanted. Ian was praised for his social skills and ability to create networks, even though his parties destroyed half the house. When Ian's grades began to decline in his junior year, I was grounded for leaving a glass in the sink. They accused his teachers of failing to comprehend athletes' schedules and hired private tutors. They said my GPA should have been higher and that I might need to put more of an emphasis on my studies rather than my computer hobbies when I was working weekends and maintaining a 3.8 GPA. The double standard was absurd. For sending a child to the hospital during football practice, Ian received a suspension. Really just Ian going crazy and losing his temper. They also employed attorneys and threatened to bring legal action against all parties. When I returned home with a split lip and a black eye after being jumped by 3 seniors for being Ian's strange younger brother, they spent 20 minutes questioning what I had done to deserve it. The message was very clear. The investment was Ian. Until I turned 18 and became someone else's problem, I was the mistake they had to put up with. Uncle Caleb was the only member of my extended family to treat me with respect. Dude, my dad's younger brother was perfect. Not only was my father successful without stepping on people, but he was also self-assured, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say, rather than constantly contrasting me with Ian. Caleb was the owner of a custom home construction company that he had started from scratch after leaving the army. Lived in this amazing home that he had designed himself and had a group of guys who had been with him for years. In order to teach me mechanics and construction, Caleb began hosting me every other weekend in his workshop. For a child who enjoyed building things, the man had every tool you could possibly need. Paradise was the place. More significantly, Ian was not permitted to follow me there. Caleb quickly put an end to my parents' attempts to discuss both boys during these visits. I gained practical skills there. Welding, power tools, wiring, framing, and engine rebuilding. Like a junior partner, Caleb allowed me to make mistakes without yelling at me and explained why we did things a certain way. I also got to know Alex, Caleb's business partner's son, who was coping with pressure from his own family. Alex wanted to be an engineer and design things rather than operate on people, but his father, a successful surgeon, expected his child to follow in his footsteps. Being the unsatisfactory sons who didn't conform to the expectations of our family, we clicked right away. Alex was a slender young man with thick glasses who could explain how computer processors operated and rebuild a carburetor while wearing a blindfold. But because he didn't want to live his entire life in operating rooms, his father thought he was a failure. According to my grandfather, engineering is merely applied mediocrity. While we were installing a new sound system in Caleb's truck one weekend, Alex told me that anyone intelligent enough to be an engineer should also be intelligent enough to be a doctor. Rather, Alex ended up being the brother I ought to have had. When family drama arose, we would cover for one another while working on projects together. Above all, he treated me as an equal rather than Ian's flawed younger model. One day while we were troubleshooting a computer, Alex told me, "Your brother is a piece of shit. You will, however, be something unique. You have that ability to observe how things operate." My haven was Caleb's workshop. I could actually unwind and concentrate on building things every other weekend, rather than continuously keeping an eye out for Ian's next move. Caleb told me, "You've got natural mechanical intelligence," after I had figured out the cause of his table saw's vibration and adjusted the belt tension. "That is something that comes naturally to you, cannot be instructed. No matter how many touchdowns Ian scores, he will never have that." More significantly, Caleb was showing me that destroying others wasn't necessary for success. Not because he intimidated them, but because he was fair and competent, his crews respected him. His company was expanding because he produced high-quality work rather than taking shortcuts or undercutting rivals. I only felt like myself during those weekends at Caleb's house, not just Ian's strange younger brother. The spring of my junior year was the last straw that crushed any hope my family had left. I was using the money I earned from working weekends with Caleb to build an autonomous navigation robot from scratch as part of my robotics project for the state competition. This was no robot from a LEGO Mindstorms kit. I'm referring to a significant engineering project that includes GPS navigation, ultrasonic sensors, and a custom Arduino-based control system. The design of the chassis, programming of the navigation algorithms, and fine-tuning of the sensor array took months. The work had real scholarship potential and was genuinely impressive. The robot was capable of navigating challenging obstacle courses, create precise movement patterns, and map out unfamiliar environments. I had set it up to react to voice commands, steer clear of moving objects, and even go back to its starting position from any location within a mapped area. Through online tutorials and trial and error, I was able to teach myself robotics engineering at the college level. Caleb was so proud of what I had accomplished. This is stuff of professional caliber. When his contractor friends stopped by to look at it, he would tell them, "Most college graduates lack the engineering talent that children possess." During a study session with his girlfriend Brittany and two of his meathead teammates on a Friday night, Ian found it in my room. "Really, it's just a pretext to make noise and drink my parents' beer." Ian's voice was growing louder as I worked on the last programming upstairs. "Come take a look at this." Ian dialed his pals. In his free time, little bro has been building robots. Quite geeky stuff, but cool in a way. They were huddled together around my workbench when I came downstairs. My stomach dropped when Ian casually handled months of meticulous work while holding my robot, as if he had just discovered it. I said, attempting to maintain a steady tone, "Be careful with that. Next week is the state competition. Calm down, little brother," Ian said, grinning like a predator. "Your toy won't be broken by me. Just sharing what you've been working on with my friends." However, there was a change in his expression. The wheels were turning, I could see. When he was going to ruin something I valued, he gave me that familiar look. "This work is actually quite impressive." Ian went on his tone, adopting that phony excitement that always portended trouble. "You know how to use Instagram, Brittany? A sick post would be created from this. Take a look at the robot I constructed for a state competition." "Ian." "No," I said, my voice beginning to waver with panic. "You don't own that. You can't. Simply cannot." What exactly? Ian's voice froze. That psychotic, dead-eyed expression is taking over. I am unable to feel proud of my family's accomplishments. I can't show my friends cool stuff. He could hear his teammates laughing. Brittany had already started filming Ian, posing with my robot, as if he were some sort of tech genius, after noticing the change in energy. "Months of labor have gone into this," I said, my voice cracking with desperation. "It's the only chance I have to get a good scholarship." "Just put it down, please." "What do you know?" Ian said. "You're absolutely right. This is the result of months of work on your part. Of course you ought to get it back." Like a held breath, the moment lingered in the air. Even though I knew what was coming, I was powerless to stop it. Like he was celebrating his career's first touchdown. Ian spiked my robot on the hardwood floor. Dozens of pieces burst from months of meticulous engineering. Circuit boards and broken sensors are all over the floor. He wasn't finished, though. Ian continued to stare at me as he stomped on the debris, with his boots grinding fragile parts into the hardwood. His pals were laughing and applauding like they were watching prime entertainment while they filmed the entire event. "I'm sorry," Ian said, sounding worried. "Your little toy wasn't as durable as you believed, I suppose. Perhaps the next time create a real-world capable product." My mind just suddenly exploded. Years of enduring his mistreatment. I'd give in and let him win all those times. The psychological torture and humiliation. All of it suddenly exploded out of me. Ian wanted me to charge at him mindlessly, and I did just that. Like I was a practice dummy, he caught me mid-tackle and pressed my face against the wall with enough force to shatter the drywall. Then, as his audience applauded and recorded, he took me by the throat and began methodically working me over. Between punches, he said, "This is what happens when you forget your place. You deserve this because you believe you are important in my home." After the beating, Ian stood over me and I lay on the floor, my nose covered in my own blood. He pointed to the robot debris and said, "Clean this mess up. And keep in mind who's in charge here the next time." As if he had just won the Super Bowl, his friends were giving him high fives. My parents heard the commotion and came running in to find me bleeding on the floor, with broken electronics all around. Their initial reaction was to minimize any harm to Ian's reputation. "How did you make your brother look foolish in front of his friends?" Mom insisted, not even determining whether I required medical care. "When he has company, why can't you just leave him alone? Dad was worse." While I was still spitting blood on Ian's teammates' priceless hardwood floors, I began to apologize to them for my disrespectful and inappropriate behavior. "Apologies, boys. Boundaries are not yet understood by little brother. Ian's pals were gushing about how awesome my parents were and how fortunate Ian was to have family who understood him. In fact, my mother was thanking Ian for keeping me in line and apologizing to Brittany for having to watch me have a tantrum while nodding along. While I was still bleeding, they forced me to clean up the robot parts before sending me to my room to reflect on what I had done. Ian and his friends received pizza, were allowed to remain downstairs, and were commended for their mature handling of the situation that evening. They were laughing about it downstairs, and I could hear them lying in bed with cracked ribs and an abstract art-like face. Ian's friends heard my own parents joke that I had learned my lesson and probably wouldn't misbehave again anytime soon. They were pleased with the outcome. They considered it to be good parenting. I called Uncle Caleb at that point. Without hesitation, Caleb said, "Pack everything important. In half an hour I'll be there. Don't let them convince you otherwise." When Caleb arrived in his pickup truck and saw my face, his expression changed from one of concern to one of pure murder. Without a word to my parents, who were watching from the window but lacked the bravery to confront him outside, he led me to his truck. As we were leaving, Caleb said, "Jesus Christ." For what duration has this been occurring? I told him everything. Years of institutionalized abuse, psychological torture, and parental support, in addition to the robot incident. Caleb's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he listened silently. When I was done, Caleb said, "You're staying with me forever. I'll take care of the legal matters. Clearly you can't rely on your parents to protect you." With ice packs and sincere concern, Alex was waiting at Caleb's house, rather than lectures about my mistakes. With little resistance from my parents, Caleb was granted emergency custody. In fact, they were glad to get rid of me so they could concentrate entirely on Ian's football career without having to worry about their troublesome child. Started at a new school and moved in with Caleb. Could move through hallways without having to keep an eye on my back all the time. Could concentrate in class without worrying about what Ian would ruin next. After Alex moved to my school, we began constructing our future together. Worked summers while learning practical business and construction skills from Caleb. Launched a modest computer repair business that was profitable. For 2 years, I did honest work that I was truly good at, nothing spectacular. In fact, life was good. My family was there for me. A future free from continual humiliation and fear, and friends who valued me. Then Caleb received the news that made all the difference. It began with Caleb losing weight without trying and feeling exhausted all the time. He had always had a lot of energy, but all of a sudden he was having trouble keeping up with the demands of the job site. Alex persuaded him to see a doctor after his exhaustion became so severe that he was nodding off during meetings. Pancreatic cancer in stage 3. He received aggressive treatment for perhaps 18 months, if not less, according to the doctors. "Well," Caleb said, after the oncologist broke the news, "that's not ideal." The man was making jokes to keep everyone else from losing their minds, even though he was facing death. You would think that the family would come together after hearing this heartbreaking news, that dealing with the death of a loved one would force people to set aside trivial disagreements and concentrate on what was truly important. You'd be mistaken. When Caleb's diagnosis was announced, my parents' response was a textbook example of narcissistic selfishness. Caleb's health and how they would help him during his treatment were not their top priorities. It was the impact his illness would have on their financial and social status. Mom complained during their one visit to Caleb's house following the diagnosis. "This is really hard for us. We already have to worry about Ian getting accepted to college, so having to deal with cancer in the family is just one more thing to worry about." Dad expressed his genuine worries more bluntly. "What will become of the company?" He hesitated, unwilling to say aloud, "When do you die?" Caleb has a lot of assets invested in that business after all. Someone has to consider what will happen to all of that. They were already figuring out how they might profit from Caleb's death, even though he was facing his own mortality. When it came to cruelty, however, Ian was unmatched. Ian actually told people that Caleb probably deserved it for choosing a lifestyle that led to cancer, when word spread around the school that my uncle was ill. During one of his infrequent trips home from college prep camp, I questioned him about it, and Ian simply shrugged as if he were talking about the weather. "Look," Ian said, still wearing that dead-eyed look, "I'm not saying I'm happy about it. However, perhaps this will teach him to stay out of the family business. He had no business getting embroiled in your drama. This man had saved my life and taught me the true meaning of family." Ian was basically saying that because he cared about me, he should die. In order to support Caleb during his treatment, I returned to live with him full-time. When he was too ill to work, Alex and I took turns running his business, driving him to chemotherapy appointments, and making sure he had everything he needed to stay comfortable. During their 2 or 3 visits, my parents were complaining about how hard things were getting for them, how they couldn't concentrate on Ian's career because of all the medical drama, and how they didn't have time to take care of their family when they were already overburdened. Caleb handled everything with amazing poise, never griping about his own brother's lack of help or expressing resentment over their self-centeredness. He only paid attention to how much time he had left, and to making sure Alex and I were ready for whatever was coming up. Blood is not what defines a family. One evening, following a particularly unpleasant chemotherapy session, Caleb told me, "It all depends on who is available when you need them. I couldn't have asked for more family than you two have given me." The last blow occurred in the final weeks of Caleb's life. When my parents finally arrived for what they knew would be their final visit, he was in the hospital, hardly conscious most of the time, rather than providing consolation or assistance. "You know, Caleb, perhaps this is God's way of teaching you that family comes first," my father said as he entered Caleb's room. "You had no right to meddle in our boy's upbringing." I could see the pain flash across Caleb's eyes, but he was too weak to react. That's when I realized my father wasn't merely a bad parent or an enabler. He was really mean. Dad's top priority was to make sure Caleb understood that helping me had been wrong, even though his brother was dying. That day I asked them to leave and warned them not to return. Instead of being surrounded by self-centered parasites who were only interested in using his death to further their own agenda, Caleb deserved to spend his last days with people who truly loved him. I was holding Caleb's hand when he died on a Tuesday morning in March. Rodriguez, Alex, and several other members of his crew, who had grown to be like father figures to me, were also present. Naturally, my parents attended the funeral and spoke with Caleb's contractor friends and business associates for the majority of the service about how hard this loss was for them and how much they would miss their beloved brother. When people offered condolences during the funeral, Ian, who had come home from college, texted on his phone the entire time. With a rehearsed sad smile, he would tell them that Caleb was at last at peace. Caleb's attorney called to arrange a will reading a week later. The lawyer's office was the planned location for the Saturday morning meeting. My parents arrived dressed to the nines, obviously anticipating that this will be a big financial event for them. Ian probably thought he would inherit enough to pay the rest of his tuition, so he drove down from college. Morrison, the lawyer who had known Caleb for 20 years, got right to work. Caleb was very clear about what he wanted. Morrison started to extract a heavy document. When his diagnosis became terminal 6 months ago, he updated this will. He began by giving his crew a few small gifts, including tools and equipment, contributions to nearby nonprofits, etc. He then revealed the truth to my nephew, who taught me the true meaning of family. "I leave behind my home business, all related property and equipment, and the rest of my estate, which includes all investment and savings accounts." There was an overwhelming silence in that room. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally outright rage were the 6 main emotions that my parents experienced in the tens. According to my father, that cannot be true. His voice wavered. Caleb wouldn't trust a teenager with everything. Morrison gave me a sealed envelope and said, "There must be some mistake. Caleb left you this letter as well." My parents sat there in disbelief as I opened it with shaky hands. Although Caleb's handwriting was shaky, my real son could still read it. "When my family abandoned me, you taught me the true meaning of family. When I most needed you, you were there. In contrast, I was treated like a burden by those who shared my blood. By being the man they couldn't be, you deserved every bit of this. Use this inheritance to create something truly remarkable. Additionally, keep in mind that you inherited more than just wealth and real estate. The obligation to surpass them was passed down to you. Although you now own the company, Rodriguez and the team have contracts that ensure their employment for the rest of their lives. Treat them as you would like to be treated. P.S. Because of this, your parents will go crazy. Permit them. They owe you nothing." The letter confirmed every choice I had made, as if Caleb were speaking from the afterlife, and all the sacrifices I had made. My parents went completely crazy. "This is deception." Dad's face was turning purple as he shouted. Caleb was tricked. He wasn't thinking clearly. "We will dispute this." After everything they had endured with Caleb's illness, Mom was screaming that everything was unfair and that they deserved something. The worst was Ian, insisting that since we were brothers, I divulge what Uncle Caleb took from the family. Family should also remain together. It was an absurd entitlement. Because of their shared DNA, these individuals who treated Caleb like trash while he was dying now believed they were entitled to his life's labor. It was intended that you would be the family's failure. Ian claimed that his mask was finally falling off entirely. In order for the rest of us to feel good about our decisions, you were meant to be worthless. It's not meant to operate this way. The will Morrison clarified was unchangeable. When he wrote it, Caleb was of sound mind, had documented years of evidence regarding my parents' neglect, and had included specific provisions to prevent challenges, as well as Ian's mistreatment. Morrison praised Caleb for his thoroughness. He expected this response and made preparations accordingly. I left that office with more money than I could have ever dreamed of, along with Caleb's house keys and business documents. More significantly, I left with the assurance that the man I had most admired believed I had merited it. My parents hired attorneys, threatened to sue, and searched for any means to void Caleb's will for months. They couldn't find one. When it came to his inheritance, Caleb had been too astute and meticulous. I had choices that I never would have imagined. Financed college without taking out loans. Kept Caleb's construction company operating profitably. Most significantly, I was able to have the financial stability to create the life I truly desired, rather than merely getting by on a daily basis. I made the decision to continue running the construction company while attending the state university to study computer science. While I was in class, Rodriguez took over as foreman and essentially oversaw daily operations. The crew worked extremely hard to ensure that Caleb's company continued to thrive because they were so devoted to his memory. I developed the computer repair business that Alex and I had founded into a respectable tech support company. Caleb began providing services such as digital project management systems, security camera installations, and network setup for construction sites to his clients. Through it all, Alex remained my best friend and business partner. We shared a commute to college, studied together, and grew both businesses over the summers. It was easier for me to have someone who had experienced the dysfunction in the family with me. I first met Leah in a junior year computer science study group. She was a gifted programmer who was majoring in both mathematics and CSS. She was able to debug code that had me baffled for hours. Leah was not like any girl I had ever spoken to. She wasn't only interested in what they could do for her, she was actually curious about how things operated. She wanted to visit construction sites and learn how we handled challenging projects after I told her about Caleb's construction company. She saw opportunities for improvement as soon as I showed her the tech support systems I had created. Here, you've created something truly remarkable. After spending a weekend assisting with the upgrade of our project management software, she informed me, the majority of people our age are merely attempting to determine their life goals. You're doing it already. Leah didn't feel sorry for me or act like I was a broken object when I eventually told her the whole truth about my family's circumstances. She was truly impressed by my ability to bounce back from all that abuse and still develop into a decent person. Together, we received our diplomas. Alex holds a degree in engineering. Leah had both her majors and job offers from 3 different tech companies while I had my degree in CSS. She wanted to stay and contribute to the expansion of what we had created together, which is why she specifically selected the local offer. In the tech support and construction businesses, Alex became my official business partner. Rodriguez became a minority owner of the construction company after we properly incorporated everything and began to plan for actual growth. After I graduated, Leah and I moved in together. For my 24th birthday, I was given a lovely apartment close to both of our offices. I was taken aback when Leah gave me a golden retriever puppy from the neighborhood shelter, whom she named Rex, after the T-Rex in Toy Story, which seemed appropriate in some way. Rex was adopted as both companies' family mascot. He was adored by construction crews and had a remarkable ability to soothe anxious clients when their networks failed. Using my grandmother's ring, which Caleb somehow persuaded my parents to give him, before they realized the value of the inheritance, I proposed to Leah 2 years later on the deck of the house he had built. It was a small but ideal wedding. 3 months after the wedding, Leah's family, Alex and his girlfriend Rodriguez, some of the crew, and a couple of our close college friends were present. My phone rang while I was working late in my office. I answered it even though it was an unknown number. "We saw your wedding pictures, son." My father's voice sounded shaky, as if he had been crying or drinking. It's unbelievable that you didn't invite your own family to this significant occasion. The guilt trip came quickly and without shame. How my decision to not invite my mother to my wedding had crushed her feelings. Ian was devastated to be unable to attend his younger brother's special day. How, in spite of everything that had transpired years before, they were entitled to be there. Dad went on. We know there were some challenges when you were younger. We are still your parents, though. Family should have significance, particularly during significant life events. I gave him space to speak. I was curious to find out the true direction of this. Finding out didn't take long. The fact is, we need your assistance. At last his voice broke as he confessed. Ian is having a lot of problems. Was arrested for distributing steroids to high school students while working as a coach. We cannot afford good attorneys and he faces actual jail time. It was there. They wanted me to save the golden child who had made my adolescence a living hell after we had been cut off for 7 years, after I had missed my wedding, and after I had treated Caleb like trash while he was dying. Caleb's inheritance was shared with us. Mom picked up the phone. Tears filled her voice. We are aware that you inherited a sizable fortune. Ian is your sibling. You must assist him. Why would I do that? I asked in a composed tone. Since we are related? Mom broke down in tears. We are still your parents in spite of everything. You were given life by us. You were raised by us. And right now when we most need assistance, the only person who can save us is you. I wasn't raised by you. Silently I said. I was raised by Caleb. Please, Dad begged. All pretense of authority has now vanished. Ian's lesson has been learned. He is aware of his errors. He has evolved. The only person who can afford quality legal counsel is you. I have a question for you, I said, feeling oddly at ease as Ian knocked me out. When he destroyed all of my friendships, did you consider saving me? When Caleb was dying and you told him he deserved it for helping me, did you think about my future? Did family have any significance back then? The quiet dragged on until it was awkward. Mom whispered, We made mistakes. Now we are aware of that. However, Ian faces a 10-year prison sentence. It will ruin his entire life. You've achieved success. You're wealthy. You must have the capacity for forgiveness. I said I had already forgiven. My life was being poisoned by holding that anger, so I forgave you years ago. However, forgiveness does not entail that I must spare you from the repercussions of your decisions. You can't simply leave your family behind. Dad yelled, his despair giving way to rage. Because it was simpler than acknowledging that you had reared a monster you allowed years of systematic abuse. The one man who genuinely cared about me was treated like trash by you, because he posed a threat to your story about Ian's uniqueness. It's unfair. Mom got things started. Your son would have gone to any lengths to support his family. I kept interrupting her. Someone who genuinely cared about other people worked hard and avoided trouble. You went with the psychopath instead, who is currently being charged with federal drug offenses. The wrong child was thrown away by you. We apologize. Mom was crying now. Ian is also our son, even though we are aware of our horrible mistakes. He requires assistance. Please. Now Dad was crying. I was tortured by this broken man who had once watched his golden child suffer. He is your sibling. Blood must have some significance. On the other end of the line, I could hear both of them sobbing. Never call again. Please don't come near me. Don't get in touch with my wife or my company either. Ian excavated his own tomb. Let him lie in it. I hung up after that. 2 days later, Ian called me directly from the county jail, sobbing and pleading like a little kid. He was whining that he was sorry that he had learned his lesson and that God was in prison. Do you recall what you once told me? I told him I needed to find out where I fit in. I did, however, learn it. There are 2 profitable businesses operating at my place. Being surrounded by people who genuinely care about me and residing in the home that Caleb constructed. You belong exactly where you are. Behind bars, ignored and totally unimportant to anyone who matters. Please. Ian broke down in tears. I am aware that I treated you horribly. I'm afraid even though I know I don't deserve your assistance. What will happen to me in prison is unknown to me. Before you decided to sell drugs to high school students, you ought to have considered that. I said, Ian, actions have repercussions. That lesson is finally sinking in. I'll do anything, he pleaded. I'll issue a public apology. I'll tell you everything I did. Somehow I'll put it right. It cannot be made right. Silently I said, what you have destroyed cannot be restored. You cannot restore my self-esteem, my projects, my adolescence, or my bond with my parents. The harm is irreversible. However, we are brothers. No, I spoke firmly. We're not. You lived in the same house as me and were my biggest bully. I blocked all of their numbers after hanging up. 6 months later, I learned that Ian accepted a plea bargain for 8 years in federal prison from Alex's father, who was still in touch with people in their social circle. After losing their apartment, my parents moved to another state to live with my mom's sister. Word of Dad's treatment of Caleb spread, and his attempts to relaunch his construction company were unsuccessful. Leah and I recently closed on a larger home in the area where Caleb once resided. We're throwing Rodriguez a legendary party in honor of his retirement next year. We were asked to be godparents by Alex and his wife, who are expecting their first child. I created a life. Being surrounded by people who chose to be family, rather than those who happened to share my DNA, is something Caleb always said I deserved. Story 2. Okay, my family is portraying me as the villain, therefore you guys need an outside viewpoint. Oh, a few months ago, U30 Mail went to a different location. It's not spectacular, but it's a good place for me and my kid who is in grammar school. My 24-year-old younger brother Tyrell and his 22-year-old girlfriend Amber were evicted around that time and requested if they could stay with me for a bit. I didn't want to, but I thought it would only be temporary, and I had nowhere else to go. It was okay at first, but after a month or so, they were far too accustomed to breaking the rules. When I'm not home, I don't invite random strangers around. When my kid is around, please be considerate and refrain from smoking in the house. Instead, they played music while my son was sleeping, had people in and out while I was at work, left the home trashed, and twice I discovered Amber smoking in the restroom. Their disdain for my son's mother was the main problem. Although my baby mothers and I are no longer together, we get along quite well. On the weekends, she picks up her kid, and occasionally she leaves him off at home. Amber, however, decided to start making brief remarks about sleep whenever the mother of my son dropped by. Small pointless things like, "Oh, you came this time," or "Didn't realize you still cared." Although I acknowledged that it was out of pocket, my son's mother informed me that it made her uncomfortable despite keeping it elegant. When I questioned them about everything, Tyrell urged me to stop being sensitive and attempted to minimize things as like she was kidding. For me, that was the final straw. Since I'm now the villain, I gave him 30 days to locate another place. My mother is yelling at me over the phone, stating that family is strong and just needs direction. I don't care that Amber has been making subliminal posts on Facebook about phony individuals who act helpful, but ultimately abandon you. My rules, my home. I'm not going to allow 2 mature adults to cause turmoil in my house when I'm parenting a son. I hate to say that, but if Tyrell doesn't address it, the consequences will eventually land him in jail or worse. At the moment, he is destroying all of his bridges. After they disregarded my house, my regulations, and my son's mother, am I the one who should throw them out? Not the concept. My mother is yelling at me over the phone, stating that family is strong and just needs direction. I take it that your mother is family, and who better to mentor one of the issue's mother? How come she doesn't offer them a house? Yes, Mom, you're an 8 ugly ass. At what time, to get the locksmith in to change the locks, you need provide all of the materials. They don't deserve any grace because they've crossed so many boundaries. When your mother doesn't have to deal with the drama, disrespect, or mess, she claims that the family stays together. Perhaps she should take the initiative and provide them advice under her house, if she genuinely feels that they need it. You went above and above. Oh, and your family is probably overreacting since being with you will make it simpler for them to step up next. Never listen to someone who tells you you're mistaken. I don't mean to seem foolish, but if you can all do everything in your power to keep him out of jail, then he should go to jail so he can learn his lesson. Unfortunately, some people don't learn until they've reached their lowest point. Others reach their lowest point, gain no knowledge, and at least break free from their family's shackles. Being linked to someone who has issues is not the same as being family, yet neither is ideal. Consistent disrespect, pain, drama, and maltreatment are not associated with the latter. The fool is you. You didn't give him 30 days, I think. In most places, the law is 30 days. If you're a renter, the welfare of your son in a secure environment is your top priority as a father. Bring up the fact that your mother raised Pyro when she is being mean to you. It is your responsibility to protect and raise your own child. Her grandchild, a real child, is being harmed by your adult brother and girlfriend. They may attempt to obtain tenancy or squatter's rights. I hope he issues an official eviction notice or kicks them out right away. The 5 to 10 days notice ought to have been enough in my opinion. In certain places, I would not have permitted them to stay another 30 days. Even though they aren't on the lease and don't pay any bills, you have to legally evict them within 60 days through court proceedings, which can take months. It's only 30 days up in my state. They must leave today. I have a golden retriever named Max. He's been with me since college and is honestly my best friend. About 2 weeks ago, Max was diagnosed with a condition that requires surgery, but not life-threatening yet time-sensitive. The surgery is scheduled for next month and is expensive, around $3,500. I've already paid the deposit and started budgeting carefully. Now here's where it gets messy. My sister, 29, is getting married in 3 months and plans to have a destination wedding in Greece. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid. She recently asked all of us to pitch in an extra $1,000 each to help her and her fiancé fund their honeymoon. They're doing a month-long Europe trip after the wedding. This was not part of the original plan, and she made it sound optional at first. When I told her I couldn't contribute because of Mac's surgery, she got really upset. She said I was being selfish, that this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for her, and that I'm prioritizing a dog over my human sister. She also said I'm single and don't have kids, so I don't get it. I said I love her and I'm happy to be there for her wedding, but I won't cancel my dog surgery to help fund her vacation. She blew up and said if I can't be part of the full experience, maybe I shouldn't be in the bridal party at all. I'm hurt. I genuinely thought I was being reasonable. Some of my family agrees with her and says I should have just quietly said no instead of explaining why, because it made her feel less important. So am I the idea for choosing my dog surgery over helping fund my sister's honeymoon, not the concept? I never understood people getting married in expensive locations and expecting people to just spend the extra money on top of that. Your pet needs surgery. Very simple. If you want to plan a big wedding, a vacation, you should have enough funds for that and not rely on anybody. If anyone wants to support you, it should be from their own free will and not trying to force it on the person. None of this is even relevant. It's absolutely insane to ask people to pay for your honeymoon period. It doesn't matter if OP is swimming in cash Scrooge McDuck style and can pay for 1,000 dog surgeries without blinking. Your honeymoon is not other people's responsibility. My exact thought, like, sorry you were expecting all this to help fund the honeymoon. Hello, well, people don't go on honeymoons if they can't afford them. Your marriage, your responsibility. The audacity. That's absolutely mental. And people are already forking out for a destination they may not be interested in. Opie's sister is beyond selfish and entitled. The way my eyes would have rolled. Your sister has delusions of grandeur, and it seems some people are buying into her fantasies. Just look after Max. Let's rely on us. And they have no way of affording surgery. But your sister can get off a bus and work extra shifts or a second job to pay for a honeymoon. She can get a divorce in 3 months and have another wedding. But your dog needs surgery. Oh, you. 36th male, have a son. Nearly adults. Who's graduating from high school this year? This moment, I split up when he was young and I married my now wife, 37, a few years ago. His mom doesn't live close by, so my son mostly stays with me. But he'll call her a few times a week and go over to her house on long weekends. My son wanted to invite me, my wife, his mom, and his brother, 19, to his graduation. But each student only gets up to 3 tickets. My son tried asking if he could get 1 more, but then I told him that since the school auditorium wasn't very big, they wouldn't have enough seating if they gave students extra tickets. I told him the school usually does a raffle for extra tickets if they have any open spots, but the tickets aren't guaranteed. My son talked to me about it and said he didn't know what to do because he wanted both his mom and my wife to be there. He said that he could just invite my wife if it was easier and celebrate with his mom separately. I know that my son is still close with his mom even though he doesn't see her as often anymore. So I told him that unless there was a specific reason he didn't want it there, he should probably invite his mom first and put his name in for the raffle to try and get one for my wife. He seemed happy with this idea and called his mom to tell her. Earlier today, my wife asked my son about the graduation, and he told me that he didn't have enough tickets for everyone, but was trying to get an extra one for her. She asked to be given the tickets to, and he said me, his brother, and his mom. She seemed a bit surprised, but didn't say anything else. Later, she said if I could ask my son to give the ticket to her instead of his mom, and I told him no because it was his choice, and he'd already told his mom. She said she didn't understand why he would give it to his mom when he doesn't even see her that often, and they're easier to just giving it to her. I told her that I told him to invite his mom, and even if he doesn't see her as often, It doesn't mean that his mom doesn't matter to him. She got upset and asked why I would tell him that. And wouldn't I rather spend the day with her instead of my ex? I said that it didn't matter what I thought because my son is really close with his mom, and just because I've had issues with it doesn't mean that he does too. Now my wife is angry at me and accused me of just wanting to see my ex. I want my wife to come to the graduation, but it's more important that my son has his mom there. Am I the idea? Most definitely not the idea. Your son's graduation isn't about you, your wife, or your ex. It's about your son and his actual parents, assuming they're both involved in his life. And it sounds like you both are. I should get to see this milestone happen. Your wife is incredibly insecure. Saying who looks more important to your son is not a contest. She should be ashamed for making his big moment about her instead of him. Was this not an issue when the 19-year-old graduated with only been married for not even a year at that point? And she didn't know them as well, so it wasn't really a problem. Wait, so your wife has only been the stepmom for less than 3 years? Yeah, she's definitely in the wrong here and shouldn't feel entitled to a ticket. Some entitlement your now wife has. Seriously, it even crossed her mind that she should take your son's mother's place. I agree. The fact that she's so self-absorbed she can't understand why a kid wants his mother, whom he still lives to and talks with frequently at his graduation, is a massive red flag. Not even just that. But is she angry at Opie about it? I can appreciate her being upset, and even briefly angry, but anything more is concerning to Opie. It's not the plan, but you have a significant issue with your wife. Oh, 828 female. I've spent the last month or so traveling around Southeast Asia on foot, mainly in Thailand. I met 2 other lone travelers about $12 at my hospital at the start of my Thailand portion of the trip, and we ended up staying together as a trio for the following few weeks. We seemed to get along well, but as time passed, I discovered that they both have somewhat different travel styles and are fairly type A, whereas I'm much more laid back. They cared more than I did, so I let them make the plans and didn't see anything wrong with it. I just went with the flow, though I never arrive more than 5 or 10 minutes late. I also have a propensity to be a little disorganized. Furthermore, if we leave the hostel 5 minutes later than scheduled for dinner or the beach, does it really matter? In any case, we're hanging out with fun people in a fun place. In any case, we're all getting along great, and in the past few weeks we've expanded our small team by 4 members. That was before the first 2 sat me down yesterday and informed me that they no longer wanted to travel with me because they find it annoying that I never contribute to plans and that I'm always late. Since I don't really care what we do, I told them that I would have been happy to make concessions if I had known they were upset, and that I honestly believed that perhaps not being involved in the plans was making things go more smoothly. In this manner, the team only needs to balance 2 individuals, sometimes at odds, regardless of how they feel. Cool, but I told them to make up their minds. And if they go their own way, I won't take it personally. The conflict arises at this point. They told me that since there are 2 of them and 1 of me, it would be more equitable if I were the one to go, because they truly enjoy the group dynamic with the other 4 people we found. I informed them that I enjoy traveling with other people as well, and that it's not me who has a problem, so I'm not going to do that. Am I the fool then? Here everyone has an idea. If someone consistently arrives 5 or 10 minutes late, type A personalities notice, especially if they are the ones who invested the time and energy to make the arrangements. You understand the concept there. The 4 other individuals can then decide who they want to travel with. Well done, heavy idiots, for attempting to expel you from the group. It's definitely not the idea, my dear. Southeast Asia is another place I'm visiting right now. I was traveling with a group of friends when I met them. We all had unique personalities and resolved conflicts as they arose. These folks are awful. You need to talk to the other people. Judy, Jane, and I have therefore determined that our personalities do not mesh. Following this block of accommodations, we will part ways. Nobody wants to lose you as a group, and we all adore the group vibe. Since we'll let you know what they're thinking about tomorrow, my next course of action is to outline your next planned location. I don't mean to put any pressure on you, but could you please let us know if you would rather go alone or with them? OHP will suffer as a result. LOL. Imagine giving that speech after arriving 5 to 10 minutes late. The other 4, I suppose, will accompany the planners, and OPI will find out who is contributing. Nothing indicates that they are not truly required. The fool is you. The next time you're late, don't be shocked if everyone else leaves without you. Last April, I, a 27-year-old woman, married my 28-year-old husband. We distributed reminders 6 months prior to the wedding and our wedding invitations a full year in advance. As the youngest of 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy, my parents have always cherished my brother Jacob, who is 22 years old. There is nothing you can do wrong. This has led to a great deal of conflict between us as adults. Yes, it's like a hyperactive adolescent boy, and it's gotten worse with his 21-year-old fiancée Kelly, who supports his bad behavior. Kelly tells him all the time that we should be thankful for having him as a sibling and doesn't value him. I don't understand him, and my parents don't show him enough grace because they believe they are my sisters. A week prior to my wedding, Jacob informed me that he would not be attending due to his commitments to Kelly and their upcoming trip. I pleaded with him to attend, stressing how much I wanted him to be at my wedding. At this point, my mother intervened and told me not to worry because he would be there. An hour before I was to walk down the aisle, I found out. He had no intention of being there. I was heartbroken. My husband and sisters had to soothe me. He was our ring bearer, and I am determined to bring my whole family. I was pleased for Jacob when he announced to our family that he and Kelly were engaged. He declared that May 30th of this year would be the date of his wedding. We must all be present, he underlined. We were required to attend according to a text message from his fiancée. I've been considering not going to his wedding. My brother skips my wedding, and I don't get along with Kelly. When I suggested that I might not go to my mother, she became irate and told everyone. My parents and brother Kelly are now accusing me of being petty, foolish, and a brat for possibly missing his wedding. Since they didn't attend mine, my sisters and husband decided that I didn't have to go, but I'm not sure if I would be the one to miss my brother's wedding. Mom wasn't at all disappointed that he didn't show up. In fact, she told me that he was busy and that I should stop crying like a baby. She was completely unconcerned. I was older and set an example for him, not the fool, so he didn't come and keep telling me that it was my responsibility to act like an adult. You are free to turn down the invitation for any reason. It is inappropriate for his fiancée to insist that the family go. You shouldn't be upset if you don't go to your brother's wedding because he didn't attend yours. He acts in a very hypocritical manner. All of them should go pound. Send his fiancée a text message stating that we had to be there. If you don't show up, what will she do? All right, you. It is, after all, an invitation to an event that you are under no obligation to attend. The only thing to think about is any long-term harm to relationships that you might prefer not to ruin by not following in your parents' footsteps. When your brother blew off your wedding, including his role as ring bearer, why was your family upset? How could they defend their treatment of you now? Your weak parents have allowed him to become a narcissistic idiot. Take a position, don't leave. Perhaps at last he will realize that it's not all about him. Update. It turns out that neither my husband nor the wife of my older sister are invited, since those spouses are, in her words, temporary, and she doesn't want them in any photos. He doesn't want any of them there. For that reason, my eldest sister has chosen not to go. Spouses are not permanent. Your spouses are not invited, but attendance is required. You should be thankful that your younger brother, who was a member of the bridal party at his sister's wedding, decided to take a vacation instead. It will be a fascinating addition to your family, Kelly. Since spouses are only temporary, I'll let your mother and brother know that you will attend his upcoming wedding. I hope the updated information will allay your concerns about not attending. You didn't bring up the other sisters' opinions, but if you 3 avoided it, it would be a clue to your parents and brother. That might serve as the impetus for some or all of them to reconsider their decisions. Really. Alternatively, it might release you and your sisters from their absurdity. Story 3. The thing about being the quiet one in the family is that nobody sees you until they need something or until you stop showing up. My name's Ryan. I'm 30. I live just outside Seattle in a quiet little house with foggy windows and no expectations. Every morning I make a cup of coffee, drive 10 minutes to the office, and do my job. The one my family still thinks involves fixing gadgets or tightening screws. I co-founded a sustainable energy company. We're doing pretty well, but my parents, my sister, they never asked. Never cared. They just assumed I was doing something. Blue collar and vaguely disappointing. And honestly, I let them because it wasn't worth the effort to correct people who'd already decided who I was. I hadn't spoken to my parents or my sister Jessica in over 2 years. No birthdays. No holidays, ho. How are you doing? Just silence. And you know what? For a while that silence felt okay, but 2 years ago I decided to break it. I booked a trip home for my mom's birthday, took time off work, cleared the calendar. Figured maybe enough time had passed. Maybe I could show up early, help with prep, just like I used to. No drama, no pride, just family. So I called home. My dad answered on the second ring. "I'm coming a few days early this year." I said, "Let me know if you need anything picked up." There was a pause, a long one. Then his voice came back flat. He sounded like he was chewing on nails. "Ryan, maybe don't come home this year." I thought I misheard him, sorry. "What, Jessica's bringing her boyfriend? He's someone important. A manager from a good family, carries himself well, talks like a professional." Then came the hammer. "And your job." It's hard to explain. It doesn't reflect well. I swear for a second I forgot how to breathe. "You're uninviting me?" I asked, stunned, because I don't look good next to Jessica's boyfriend. He didn't deny it, didn't backtrack, just double down. "You showing up would embarrass the whole family. If you still insist I'm coming, don't call me your father." And just like that, click. He hung up. I stood there in my kitchen holding a cooling cup of coffee in one hand, and the weight of that sentence in the other. "If you still insist on coming, don't call me your father." Those words didn't come from anger. They came from certainty, like he'd been waiting to say them for years. For a moment I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe he didn't mean it. But the tone was clear. Cold, measured, practiced. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just stood there staring, remembering that I'd been quietly paying my parents' electricity, water, and internet bills for the last 2 years, every month on time. No questions asked, and suddenly a new voice in my head whispered, "If I'm the family's shame, what exactly is Jessica?" The thing about betrayal is it rarely announces itself with fireworks. It creeps in on quiet conversations and gut punches that don't leave bruises. And that phone call, that was my gut punch. But what came after that was clarity. I sat down at my kitchen table, still holding the coffee I made before the call. It was cold, now. Not that it mattered. The bitterness wasn't in the mug. I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking history. It wasn't even hard to find. Every month, the same 3 payments went out like clockwork, pulled automatically from my business account, like tiny acts of loyalty no one asked for, and no one appreciated. Puget Sound Electric, $137.12. Glen Miller Water Authority, $96.23. Cascade Net Internet, $142.11. Each one was tagged with their address, each one paid without fail for over 2 years. That added up to over $9,800 and forgotten kindness. And not once did anyone call to say thank you. No text, no card, no, "Hey, we appreciate you." But now I wasn't presentable. Not good enough to share a meal with them because Jessica was bringing someone important. Some mid-level manager with a 6-figure LinkedIn profile. And a face made for filters. And I guess standing next to him in my jeans and flannel shirt would be too much reality for my parents to stomach. My jaw clenched as I scrolled back through the records. Each line item felt like another slap I didn't realize I'd already taken. I remember the first call clearly 2 years ago after Dad's last job had fizzled out and they couldn't make ends meet. Mom called me, voice trembling. "Sweetheart, your dad's too proud to ask. But the bills they're getting tight. Could you help?" Just until we get through the winter. That winter turned into 2 years, and not once did anyone bring it up again, except when something wasn't working or when a payment confirmation didn't arrive on time. So I sat there, fingers still on the trackpad, staring at the truth in transaction history. And then I started clicking cancel, autopay, remove payment method, deactivate, log, and access. It was surgical, clean, quiet. I didn't do it to get revenge. I didn't even do it out of anger. I did it because I realized in one so fracturing moment that I was never part of the family picture they were trying to paint. I was just the utility that made the lights work. I left the browser open, stared at the blank space where the next payment due reminder used to be, and for the first time in months, I breathed a little deeper. I didn't hear from them for a week. Then, like clockwork, a text from Mom. "Hey, sweetie, hope you're doing okay. The internet bill came in late. Can you handle that? Love you, love me. Not sorry for what we said. Not, we miss you. Just handle that." I didn't respond. 3 days later, voicemail from Dad. Power company called. Said payment bounced. "What's happening? Call me." "No, hey son, no, we shouldn't have said what we said. Just fix this." That was the moment it sank in. They didn't want me at Mom's birthday because they were afraid I'd embarrass them. but they still wanted me to fund the party. The candles, the cake, the lights, just not my presence. And I realized then my value to them ended where my money stopped. So I put my phone on silent, folded my laptop shut, and waited. Not for chaos, not for an apology, just for reality to hit them the same way it hit me. The thing about a power outage is that it doesn't happen all at once. It stutters, the lights flicker, the fridge hums, then goes quiet. The silence settles like fog. It started just after sunset on the night of my mom's birthday. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Erin was my cousin, the only person in the family who still talked to me like I wasn't an unpaid background extra in the movie of Jessica's perfect life. She texted me around 6:40 p.m. Power just cut out. The whole house went dark, and Leslie nearly screamed. I smiled, not because I was proud, because for the first time the darkness wasn't mine. According to Erin, it was picture-perfect chaos. They just sat down for dinner. The table was full charcuterie board candles, birthday banners hanging crookedly over the fireplace. Jessica and her boyfriend Nathan were at the head of the table. He wore a blazer. She wore a fake modest smile. My mom was glowing, playing hostess, pouring wine, acting like her daughter had brought home royalty. Then the lights blinked, once, twice, gone. At first they thought it was the breaker that got up muttering, "I've got it." He was some kind of electrician, but when he opened the panel there was no click, no fix, because the bill hadn't been paid, because I hadn't paid it. And that's when it started to fall apart. They tried calling Puget Sound Electric. After waiting on hold for 15 minutes, the agent told them the account had been deactivated. When Dad asked why, the answer was simple. The person responsible for payments removed themselves from the account. Boom. Now I didn't hear this firsthand, but Erin was live updating me from the bathroom like a gossip correspondent during a war zone. Jessica just asked if it was a neighborhood thing. Nathan is looking around like he stepped into a low-income sitcom, and Leslie just offered to call her handyman. I don't think she understands how electricity works. Your dad just said, I kid you not. He probably did this on purpose. I nearly choked on my tea. What's wild is that not one person thought maybe we did this to ourselves. They didn't ask, did we push him away? Did we cross a line? Did we reduce our son to a shameful footnote? No. They went straight to, he sabotaged us, because it's easier to blame the person who finally walked away than to admit he gave them every reason to leave. An hour later, Erin texted again. Internet's out too. Jessica can't even load Google to look up solutions. The house feels like a cave. They're eating in silence. Chef's kiss. Jessica tried to spin it. This happens sometimes. The neighborhood's old. To which Nathan replied, bless his condescending heart. Where I live, we get notifications before things get shut off. We have backup generators. Translation. What kind of broken circus did you bring me to the night unraveled from there? The fridge wasn't cooling. The music was gone. The cake candles barely held out. And somewhere in all of that low-light discomfort, my parents finally felt the version of darkness I'd lived in for years. Not literal, emotional. The kind where you're present but not wanted. The kind where you're part of the family on the bills but not in the photos. I didn't say anything that night, didn't text, didn't call, just sat in my apartment, ate leftover takeout, and watched my phone buzz with secondhand justice. Because sometimes the only thing more powerful than speaking your truth is making them feel what it's like when you stop being their silent support system. The first message came in the next morning. Not from my dad, not from Jessica, from my mom. She sent a voice memo, probably because she couldn't figure out how to type what she wanted to say without it sounding worse than it already was. Her voice was soft, controlled, rehearsed. Ryan, honey. There was a mix-up with the utilities last night. Everything went out during the party. We didn't realize how much she'd been helping us. We're so grateful, truly. Could you possibly help us get things sorted today? Grateful. Now that the wine glasses were clinking in the dark, now that Jessica's boyfriend had gotten a taste of their unpolished reality. But what stuck out most wasn't the apology, because there wasn't one. There was no. We shouldn't have said that to you. No, we were wrong. Just, there was a mix-up. As if I had accidentally taken their dignity off autopay. 10 minutes later, a call from Dad. Straight to voicemail. Ryan, you've made your point. But if you want to talk like an adult, call me back. An adult. This is from the man who told me not to call him my father. If I insisted on showing up to a birthday dinner, I didn't answer, didn't block him either, because ignoring someone hurts more when they know you saw their name flashed across the screen and chose silence. By noon, I'd gotten 4 texts from Mom, 2 from Dad, and finally a single message from Jessica. Short, clinical, like she was billing me for her emotional labor. I'm sorry if what Dad said upset you. I had nothing to do with it. But now things are really bad here. Nathan thinks our family is a mess. Can you help us fix the utility thing so we can move forward? No, Ma, I'm sorry I didn't defend you. No, I'm sorry I let them shame you. Just, can you fix it? Like I was a maintenance guy for their self-inflicted storm. I stared at that message for a while, typed out a few responses, deleted them all. But then something in me shifted. I realized I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to teach a lesson. I wanted the truth out just once. Said plainly with no rage, no guilt, just finality. So I replied with exactly one message. You all made it clear that I embarrass you, so let me make it easier. You won't have to worry about me showing up or paying your bills ever again. That was it. No emojis. No. Love you anyway. No, maybe someday. Just the end of the line. Jessica didn't reply. Neither did Mom. Dad waited 3 days, then sent me a message that read, "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." I laughed out loud in my kitchen. They gave me everything. They gave me Shane when I came home. They gave me invisibility and family photos and backhanded praise at holidays. Ryan's doing something with tech, I think. No, what they gave me was permission. Permission to stop carrying people who only clap for you when they think it makes them look good. So I took that permission and ran with it. The next morning, I updated my accounts, removed their address, revoked billing access, blocked any number that wasn't already saved. It was like closing a tab that had been open for 10 years, too long. And it was quiet, not lonely, free. The part they never asked about. Part they never even pretended to be curious about was how I got here. How I went from being the quiet one to the man who could shut their house down with 3 clicks. They never asked about the nights I spent in a shared apartment eating ramen with no heat while I wrote code under 3 blankets, or the day I pitched my first prototype in a garage with duct tape holding up the whiteboard, or how I drained my savings every cent to cover the legal fees for our first patent. To them, I just did something with computers. But what did I do? I built something from scratch. I co-founded Verdant Energy Systems, a clean tech firm focused on affordable modular wind and solar solutions for rural homes. We weren't a unicorn startup. We weren't sexy enough to land on the front page of TechCrunch. But we were profitable, stable. And by year 3, we were expanding into 5 states. While Jessica was busy updating her Instagram bio every time her boyfriend's title changed, I was closing contracts with public schools to overhaul their heating systems, while Dad was saying about kids these days never wanting to work. I was managing a team of 35 engineers and contractors, but none of it mattered because I didn't wear a blazer, because I didn't brag, because I didn't fit the dinner party narrative. And so they wrote me off one time when Jessica was home from college. We ran into each other in the driveway. I just driven in from a side visit, boots, muddy shirt, wrinkled hair, a mess from the wind. She looked at me, looked at the truck and said, "Still doing that plumbing stuff." I blinked. "Solar installations, actually. Rural electrification." She nodded like I'd said mailman and walked back inside. Later that same year, I got a call from my dad. "We're having trouble with the heater. Could you take a look?" He didn't say. "I know this is your field." Didn't say. "We're proud of what you've built. Just come fix it." Like I was the family handyman. Like I owed them every wrench and wire just to stay visible. But I showed up anyway because that's who I was. Then, I spent 6 hours crawling through that crawl space, rewiring their unit, replacing a faulty capacitor, and optimizing the efficiency so that power bill would drop by 50%. Jessica never said thank you. Then nodded once and went back to watching the game. Mom offered me reheated leftovers and called me our helpful little guy. And the kicker, that weekend when her boyfriend came over, Jessica introduced him to everyone and introduced me as the guy who helped with the heater. Not my brother, not an engineer, not a business owner, just the help. It should have heard more, but honestly, it just made things clearer. That was the moment I stopped wanting to be seen and started learning how to disappear on my terms. So when they finally coming out, when they told me not to come home, not to ruin the optics, I didn't snap because I had already left. They just didn't notice until the lights went out. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I hadn't planned to see them again, not at a grocery store, not at a gas station, not at the one restaurant I liked in my neighborhood. the one I thought they'd never bother coming to. But life has a mean sense of humor. It was about a month after the birthday disaster. I was sitting alone at Birch and Rye, a cozy, upscale spot tucked into the quieter part of town. Dim lighting, real wood tables, no TikTok influencers in sight. My kind of place. I just finished a meeting with a new local contractor and decided to treat myself a glass of Cabernet. Roasted duck, quiet. And then I heard it, the unmistakable laugh, Jessica's. I looked up and sure enough she was walking in with our parents. No Nathan, just them. She was dressed to the nines, Dad in his usual sports coat, Mom in pearls. It was like watching a rerun of a show I'd been written out of. They didn't see me at first. They were ushered to a table across the room, full of energy, full of presentation. That's when our waiter, Caleb, a college-aged kid with a sharp memory, walked over to their table and said, "Welcome. Just so you know, your brother's already dining with us tonight." I almost choked on my wine. Jessica looked up confused. "My brother?" "Yeah," Caleb said, nodding toward me with a smile. "Ryan comes here a lot. He helped the owner switch to solar last year. Saved them thousands. I didn't plan it, didn't stage it, didn't need to." Jessica turned. Sammy froze. Dad looked like someone had just handed him a live grenade. Mom smiled that tight pageant smile and waved like we were old college friends spotting each other at a reunion. I didn't wave back. I just nodded. Calm, controlled. The moment hung in the air like static before a storm. Eventually, to no one's surprise, Dad stood up and walked over. "Ryan didn't expect to see you here." His tone was forced casual, but there was an edge to it. Like he wanted to show strength, but had forgotten how to hold it. I set my glass down. "I live 6 blocks away. I eat here sometimes." He shifted. "Listen, I've been meaning to reach out." I tilted my head slightly to apologize. He blinked. "Well, to discuss everything, that birthday thing. It got out of hand. It wasn't a thing. You told me not to call you my father." He hesitated. "I said that in frustration. You meant it." We stood there in silence, the hum of the restaurant wrapping around the awkwardness like insulation. Then I added, "You know what the wild part is? If you just asked what I do, I might have told you." He looked genuinely confused. "Jessica said you do something with tech, some handyman type work." I smiled, not warmly. "I call in an energy. We handle solar infrastructure in 5 states. I built it from the ground up. That's something with tech. Pays for the roofs over hundreds of families." Heads. His face paled. "You never told us that. You never asked." I stood up, pulled a couple of bills from my wallet, and laid them on the table. "Then there's covered. That's the last thing I'll ever pay for on your behalf." He didn't stop me. As I walked past their table, Jessica looked up at me, eyes wide, jaw tight, unsure if she should be angry or ashamed. She didn't speak. Didn't need to, because the silence between us was louder than anything she could have said. I walked out into the cold air, head-high, coat open. Not a single ounce of bitterness in my chest, just peace, because now they knew. And more importantly, now they were the ones unsure if they were good enough to sit next to me. You know what the wildest part is? I didn't feel triumphant after that night at the restaurant. Didn't walk away with my chest puffed out or a movie score swelling behind me. I just felt quiet and real, like something heavy had finally been peeled off my back. Not ripped off in rage, but gently removed like a coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing for too long. I went home that night, poured a drink, and sat on my balcony, watching the lights of the city blink in the distance. And for once, I didn't wonder if any of them would ever call. Didn't check my phone. Didn't hope for an apology because I didn't need one. Somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for people to care. Stopped needing to be invited. Stopped showing up out of obligation or guilt. Or that exhausting hope that this time might be different. I built a life, a good one, with work I believed in. People who respected me and a future I wasn't trying to escape from. And no one in my family ever asked how, not once. But that was their loss, because the version of me they rejected, the not good enough, not polished, not professional one. He's the one who built all of this. They wanted someone more refined, someone they could brag about without feeling like they were stretching the truth. But I wasn't built for their dinner parties or carefully edited social media posts. I was built for hard work, quiet consistency, resilience. And that turned out to be enough. More than enough. I haven't spoken to Jessica since that night. No texts, no olive branches. I heard Nathan broke up with her shortly after. Something about her family dynamic didn't sit right. Funny how the truth has a way of sticking, even when you try to scrub it clean. As for my parents, they've reached out a few times. Mostly surface-level stuff. Dad forwarded in a photo of a house upgrade he made. Mom texted me a link to a news article she thought I'd find interesting. Neither mentioned the birthday or the restaurant or the years of silence, and I didn't reply. Not out of spite, just because I didn't need to. Sometimes the best closure is realizing you no longer need to explain yourself to people who never listened in the first place. These days, life is quieter, simpler. I still run my company, still walk to the shop with coffee in hand, still eat alone. Sometimes, not because no one wants me, but because I finally enjoy my own company. And you know what? That's enough too. Because after everything, the rejection, the betrayal, the humiliation, I came out with one thing they never expected. Peace. Not the fake kind you post about for likes, the real kind. The kind you earn when you stop chasing people who only clap for you in private and start clapping for yourself out loud. Story 4. With the exception of the clink of Derek's lawyer's pen and the shuffling of papers, the courtroom was quiet. "Your Honor," he murmured, standing and facing the judge. "She poses a threat. She has emotional instability. She is even subject to a restraining order against her own sister." I looked straight ahead. I didn't flinch, but my throat clenched. His attorney gave me a quick glance before grinning as if I had already been defeated. I said nothing at all. I knew the truth has a way of coming to light when you least expect it, not because I didn't want to. Then a woman's voice came from the rear of the courtroom, stable and clear. "I'm her sister, really, and I can offer some insight." All heads turned. The judge seems astounded as well. She moved as if she belonged at the front of the courtroom, past the lawyers and the benches. Then it was Naomi, and everything was different. Elena Kerr is my name. In the past, I believed I had an excellent feel of people. As a school counselor, I've worked with teenagers for years, encouraging them to talk about topics they previously believed they would never utter aloud. However, I didn't notice it in my own house for some reason. It wasn't until things had begun to come apart that I realized Derek's true nature. We met at an alumni function at the institution. He captivated others with his charisma, self-assurance, and warmth. Everyone admired him. I enjoyed him. I laughed at him, asked insightful questions, and expressed his admiration for my commitment to my profession. On that first night, we spoke for hours. We were married a year later. At first, I thought I had at last met someone who genuinely understood me. We purchased a little suburban house. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed our son Micah. Derek was affable and focused. He made sure I had time for my interests and gave me coffee every morning. However, things gradually altered. He began to provide minor critiques. He would fix my speech to Micah. When I described my day to him, he would raise an eyebrow as though my troubles were unimportant or overblown. He didn't shout. Then no, he didn't smash anything or bang doors. Rather, he gave me the impression that I was exaggerating, as if I weren't as intelligent as I believed, and I was sensitive and forgetful. It was subtle manipulation, the sort that creeps in and makes you wonder whether you're the one who's doing improperly. He started separating me from those who had grounded me. He claimed that my sister Naomi was a negative influence who enjoyed causing conflict and drama between us. She had said horrible things behind my back, he told me. I trusted him. He would show me messages that were not relevant, screenshots that gave Naomi a mean or envious appearance. I began to distance myself from her. I cut her off when she attempted to reach out. More than anything, I regret that. Derek's transformation began when Micah was 5 years old. He was no longer merely domineering. He was icy. He would punish me with days of silence if I didn't agree with him. He would call me dramatic if I cried. He would threaten me if I attempted to establish limits. Quiet suggestions of what he could take away rather than ones that were loud and obvious. "You know a court would never believe you." He'd say, "I'm stable. I have a good job. You cry over the dishwasher." By the time I realized what was happening, I felt completely alone. I didn't even recognize myself. I wasn't the strong woman I used to be. I was exhausted, unsure, and constantly apologizing for things I couldn't name. I left him after one night when Micah came into our room and asked Mommy, "Why is Daddy so mad at you all the time?" That was my breaking point. I packed a bag while Derek was at work and took Micah to my parents' house. It was the first time I had done something without Derek's approval in years. I expected him to beg for us back to try and explain things. Instead, he went straight to legal threats. He filed for divorce and petitioned for full custody. In his statements, he painted me as unstable, unreliable, and emotionally erratic. He claimed I was dangerous around Micah. He said I had outbursts and that I had alienated myself from my own family, including my sister, who, according to his lawyer, had filed a restraining order against me. That was the first I had heard of it. I sat in court listening to his attorney list off lies, twisting every painful memory into a weapon. My attorney leaned in and whispered, "Do you want to respond to that about your sister?" I said no, I didn't want to fight fire with fire. I wanted facts. And the fact was, I hadn't spoken to Naomi in nearly 2 years. Not because I hated her, but because I was convinced she hated me. I had no idea she was even in the courtroom. No idea she'd been following the case or had something to say. But she was there. And when she stood up, everything I thought I understood about what was happening, everything Derek had tried to make the world believe, began to unravel. I had never been in a courtroom before the custody trial. I thought it would be more formal, more rigid. Instead, it felt like a theater where my life was being performed without my permission. And Derek was the one writing the script. He walked in that day looking polished, crisp suit, clean shave, calm expression. He even smiled at the bailiff. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was just a father trying to do what was best for his child. That's what he wanted the judge to believe. That's what he had worked so hard to build, a version of himself that looked credible and safe, and a version of me that didn't. His lawyer, a woman named Clarissa Wynn, had the kind of voice that made everything sound rational, even when she was twisting the truth. She stood confidently in front of the judge and began painting a picture I didn't recognize. She said I was emotionally unstable, that I had erratic behavior, and that I was incapable of making calm decisions in the interest of our son. She used words like impulsive, high-strung, and self-isolating. She said I had a pattern of pushing away the people closest to me, and that this included my own family. Then came the moment that took the air out of the room. He turned to the judge and said, "Your Honor, I'd also like to point out that Miss Kerr's own sister has filed a restraining order against her. That should give the court great pause regarding her emotional fitness to parent." I froze for a second. I couldn't breathe. My thoughts raced. Was that true? Had Naomi really gone that far? I tried to recollect the last words we exchanged. It was a tough conversation, angry even, but it wasn't violent. There had never been threats. Don't shout. Just a melancholy stillness that stretched between us after too many misunderstandings and too much intervention from Derek. I looked at my attorney. She murmured, "Do you want to respond?" I gave a head shake. I no longer knew what was real. I didn't believe my own memories since I had been gaslighted for so long. Wouldn't I know if Naomi had filed something? I would have been served, wouldn't I? Calmly. Clarissa flipped through a folder and went on. She provided no evidence. She failed to turn in a paperwork. The statement alone, only the germ of uncertainty. That was Derek's plan. He didn't require information. He required ambiguity. He required the judge to pause and consider me. I sat in silence. Keeping my face neutral, I folded my hands in my lap. I was aware that if I displayed rage, everyone would be watching me. It would validate their account. I would be perceived as weak if I wept. So I looked directly ahead. I attempted to ignore the pain behind my eyes and maintained a regular breathing pattern. Derek kept a close eye on me. When his lawyer lied, he didn't bat an eye. He didn't correct the statement or raise an objection. He desired it to be seen. He wanted everyone in the courtroom to think I had ruined everything, even those that he burned himself. The last thing that connected me to the me before he had been was Naomi. And even though it had been a while since we had spoken, there was still a part of me that hoped she would come through if I ever needed her. But as the minutes went by and she didn't show up, I started to think that perhaps he had prevailed. Perhaps he had made her too hostile toward me. Clarissa was questioned by the judge whether she had any records of the restraining order. She answered thoughtfully, "Although we are working to acquire the file, we are certain of the assertion based on reliable information provided by Mr. Kane." My lawyer protested, saying that since no such document had been received, it shouldn't be taken into consideration until it was presented. The judge made a note but nodded. Suddenly a falsehood had been uttered into the record. I couldn't stop wondering what Micah would think if he were old enough to comprehend what was going on. What would he remember, I wondered? Would he recall my efforts to keep things safe and gentle, or would he grow up thinking I was the person his father had made me out to be? I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life as I sat in that courtroom with strangers making decisions about my future. I heard the voice, "Bill, I'm her sister really, and I can offer some insight." It seemed as though time had stopped when Naomi's voice could be heard clearly throughout the courtroom. Her tone was instantly familiar, even though I hadn't heard her speak in 2 years. Under it, shaky but confident. The courtroom changed, people turned. The judge leaned forward a little and arched her brows. "Pardon me," replied the judge. "Who are you?" Naomi came out of the rear row. Her attire didn't suggest that she was there to sit quietly. She had on a fitted blue jacket. She pulled her hair back. She appeared robust. "My name is Naomi Kerr. Elena's sister is me." Startled Clarissa Wynne glanced up. Derek strained the moment she muttered something to him. "I think I need to correct the record, but I'm not on the witness list," Naomi remarked. After glancing at the bailiff, the judge led her ahead. With a poise that gave the impression that she belonged there, Naomi moved past the rows of chairs and up to the front. My heart was racing. Why she was there was a mystery to me. I was unsure if she had come to assist him or myself. It had been a week since I last spoke to her. Derek sent me her private texts and accused me of being emotionally abusive. I tried to contact her later, but she never responded. I believe she was permanently gone. Naomi faced the magistrate. "No restraining order exists. My sister has never been the target of one of mine." "It's a lie." Clarissa got to her feet. "We thought the judge was holding up her hand, Your Honor. Let her talk." Naomi's eyes were filled with something when she gazed at me. It was years since I'd seen them, perhaps grief or remorse. "I stopped talking to my sister 2 years ago. I made unwarranted assumptions about her. Because someone I trusted showed me screenshots, texts, and partial truths that portrayed her as manipulative, I believed things. Now I see I was being exploited." There had been silence in the courtroom. Derek sat still, his face inscrutable. His jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Naomi continued. "Derek informed me that she was emotionally abusing Micah and that she was unstable. He said that she was paranoid and that she was deliberately isolating herself. All she did, he claimed, was bring people down." She hesitated. "He was composed and persuasive, and he always had a logical account of events, so I trusted him. Furthermore, I was unaware that I was simply another somebody he needed to keep her away from." The judge listened carefully while leaning back in her chair. "No restraining order was filed by me." Naomi reiterated strongly. "Never would I do it. I was tricked into believing it was in her best interest, so I broke off communication. I was mistaken. My hands were shaking. I had been holding onto the chair's arms so hard that I was unaware of it. I was having trouble breathing. The guilt of being rejected by the one person who knew me the best had been with me for months. And now she was in the public eye speaking the truth." Naomi obviously turned to look at me. "I apologize," she said. "I ought to have given a call. I ought to have asked you straight. Now that I'm here, I want to assist in repairing what I damaged." Clarissa caught the judge's attention. "Would you mind providing an explanation, counsel, for submitting a claim without supporting documentation?" "Ever composed," Clarissa said. "We are now checking the testimony that we relied on from Mr. Kane. That won't be enough in the future." Judge cut in. "In my courtroom, we take false claims seriously." Derek's normally composed expression vanished. There was a flicker of something I had never seen before when he looked toward Naomi. Fear. In that instant, I became aware of how much his strength depended on solitude and stillness. And in front of everyone, Naomi had just broken it. The judge turned back to Naomi. "What more would you want to add?" She gave a nod. "Only one thing. I would like to be recorded. I have faith in my sister. I regret ever giving her the impression that she is not a good mother." I felt noticed for the first time during that whole trial. Not only supported, but actually comprehended. The one who had previously left me had returned, and the truth had entered the room in her guise. Everything started to change as soon as Naomi got up, not just in the courtroom, but also within me. I hadn't said anything. I didn't want to play the game Derek was playing, so I decided not to defend myself that day. Instead of despair, I had opted for silence. And Naomi spoke truth into the hush. I stopped feeling helpless at that point. When Naomi had done speaking, the judge sat silently for a while. She glanced up at Derek, then down at her papers. She spoke more firmly yet calmly than previously. "Did you directly inform your legal team, Mr. Kane, that your ex-wife's sister had submitted a restraining order?" Derek lost his temper. He moved around in his chair, cleared his throat, and made an effort to respond fluidly. "At the time, it was what I understood." "Was there a miscommunication?" the judge inquired. "Perhaps a purposeful deception." He didn't answer. With a harsh tone, the judge added, I'm going to ask again. Did you intentionally mislead your legal team in an effort to undermine Miss Kerr's credibility? At a custody hearing, he gave Clarissa a quick look. She didn't give him anything. Evidently attempting to recalibrate, Derek let out a breath through his nostrils. It was my understanding that Naomi had already filed a lawsuit. I had no intention of misleading the court. Naomi took another step forward. I want to make a clarification, Your Honor. Early on in the custody fight, I received emails from Derek. He made hints that he would bring out personal information about myself and my partner if I didn't support his assertions. He desired to steer the story. He ceased to communicate with me when I refused to cooperate. In that instant, the courtroom appeared to contract. The tension in the air increased. I was no longer the center of attention for the first time. He was responsible. Rose, my lawyer, we would want to propose that the veracity and intent of all previous assertions made by Mr. Kane and his legal counsel be reevaluated. The magistrate gave a nod. I'll be formally investigating the statement that was turned in under Mr. Kane's name. Additionally, we will proceed with testimony based on the presumption that Miss Kerr's credibility has been unjustly questioned in the absence of reliable proof. For the remainder of the hearing, Derek remained silent. He didn't have to. By the time the judge called a recess, he had already caused himself harm. I remained in my chair for a few more seconds than I should have. That wait was necessary. I had to sense what was going on. Naomi approached me and knelt next to me. She said I wanted to come sooner. I had no idea how to make it better. I detest the fact that I allowed him to use me as a weapon. With tears welling up but not spilling, I nodded. I appreciate you being here. I promise not to vanish again, she replied. You are no longer alone. Before rendering a temporary custody decision, the judge gave closing statements to both parties when the court reconvened. At this moment, the court sees no reason to deny Miss Kerr her shared parenting rights. For the next 90 days, custody will continue to work in tandem with an outside assessor to keep an eye on any communications between Mr. Kane and his kid. Following the completion of thorough psychiatric and character assessments, final custody will be decided. It seemed unbelievable to me. I had finally been heard after months of anxiety, unfounded charges, and the gradual erosion of my self-confidence. As I collected my belongings, the judge had seen right through him. A small sketch of the three of us, me, him, and a tiny puppy he planned to acquire someday, was one of Micah's drawings that fell out of my folder. I took it in my palm and kept it there. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, my heart stabilized. Derek didn't look at me as he passed by. There was no sneer on his face for once. Didn't make an effort to discredit me with a sly remark. He simply walked away. Naomi stood at the doorway waiting. She strolled next to me as we went outdoors into the sunlight, present but silent. In the courtroom, that was crucial. The paperwork had been in my name. It's my reputation on the line. But my tale wasn't the only one. Every woman who had ever been told she was overly emotional was the target. All mothers who have been accused of being unstable because they asserted their authority. It was nearly too late for any sister to realize she was being fooled. That day, everything changed when Naomi spoke. She made a difference in my heart as much as in the courtroom. Derek's attempt at erasing me came back to life, clearer, stronger, and no longer isolated. It took me a while to cry after the hearing. I didn't even, though I believed I would. I believe I was still holding my breath, anticipating a mishap. I was waiting for someone to inform me that I was not truly relieved. However, it was. I sat on Micah's room floor that evening while he played with his toy vehicles. He asked if I would help him construct a garage after lining them up on the rug in a little procession. Yes, I did. We didn't discuss anything serious like court or his father. All we did was play. You seem happy again, he added, looking up at me in the midst of it. I was devastated by the sentence. Thank you, I said as I clung to him. Again and again. He immediately gave me a hug in return, even though he had no idea what I had done to deserve his gratitude. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild both my identity and my custody case. For women who had experienced emotional abuse during custody disputes, I joined a support group. I began going to a therapist on a regular basis. I went back to sleeping through the night. The next week, Naomi and I went out for coffee. It wasn't simple. At first, there was a great deal of stillness. Between long breaths and coffee sips, there was a great deal of heartbreaking honesty. She apologized to me for not posing any questions, for thinking I was who Derek said I was. I admitted to her that I wasn't proud of the way I had excluded her and disregarded my own intuition in favor of his influence. We made no effort to seem as though everything was flawless. We concluded we were worth the effort even if we didn't refer to ourselves as complete or healed. Sisters are able to reconnect with one another despite the world's attempts to tear them apart. For several more months, the custody dispute persisted. Derek's blatant tendencies of domineering conduct were exposed by the judge's order for a psychiatric evaluation. What I had experienced was validated by the evaluator's assessment. The truth gradually constructed its own record piece by piece. Evidence, not just my words. In the end, Micah's main custody was given to me. In addition to required therapy and a parenting class mandated by the court, Derek was given supervised visits. I didn't feel victorious. This had nothing to do with victory or retaliation. It was about making a life where I could parent fearlessly, where I could breathe without having to be cautious, and where my kid could feel safe. I wouldn't have believed you if you had told me a year ago that the person who once vowed to love me would be standing in court accusing me of being dangerous. I may have laughed angrily if you had told me that my sister would be the one to bring the truth to light. However, life might take you by surprise when you least expect it. This is what I've discovered. Being silent does not imply weakness. You're not giving up if you decide not to defend yourself right away. It might occasionally indicate that you're waiting for the truth to enter alongside you. I didn't win the case that day because I yelled more loudly or gave it more thought. I prevailed because I remained true to myself. I waited. I had faith that the falsehoods would fall apart on their own. And they did. I want you to know that if you're watching this and someone has attempted to minimize you, make you feel unworthy, or make you feel like your voice is unimportant, it is not necessary to get permission to speak the truth. It just takes a second. That moment can occasionally come from someone else. Sometimes it originates within you, but it will happen. I'm no longer just getting by. I'm still alive. We live in harmony as I raise my son. I'm trying to get back in touch with the sibling I believed was gone, and I'm recalling who I was before I was persuaded to be someone else. That courtroom attempted to determine my identity. However, I made my own decision in the end. I appreciate you seeing my tale. I want you to know you're not alone if it resonated with you and you've ever felt ignored, misunderstood, or that someone tried to change the truth. Your voice counts. Your narrative is important. And sometimes the most effective thing you can do is to choose to remain silent. Would you kindly like this video if it touched you? Leave a comment below and forward it to someone who should hear it. Your tale, your opinions, or even just a brief statement would be greatly appreciated. That's enough for me to remain upright. For more true tales of overcoming adversity, finding courage, and rising again, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, remember that your truth is valuable and take care of yourself, even if someone attempts to turn it off. Story 5. I never thought a regular Saturday dinner at my parents' house would mark the beginning of such a dramatic change in our family's life. But there I was sitting at the familiar oak dining table when my older sister dropped the bombshell that would set everything in motion. I decided to sell my apartment, Amanda announced, barely containing her excitement. We're going to open our own Italian restaurant. I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. The apartment she was talking about wasn't just any property. It was a luxury 3-bedroom condo in the heart of the city, the one our grandmother had left her in her will. Her husband Mike nodded enthusiastically, his fork waving in the air as he spoke. I know everything there is to know about Italian cuisine, and Amanda has restaurant experience, so we're perfectly qualified. I watched as my parents' faces lit up with admiration. Mom clasped her hands together in delight, while Dad beamed with pride. That's such a wonderful idea, honey, Mom exclaimed. You've always had such a good head for business. But something didn't sit right with me. Call me boring, and trust me, I've been called worse. But being a financial manager means I can't help but think about the practical side of things. Have you actually calculated all the risks? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Maybe it would be better to take out a business loan instead of selling your only property. Amanda rolled her eyes. Here we go again, classic Nellie, always overthinking everything. Do you at least have a business plan? I pressed on, glancing at her kids, 5-year-old Tommy and 2-year-old Lisa, who were playing with their toys in the living room. You have 2 small children to think about. If things don't work out, buying another apartment won't be easy. Oh, please, Amanda scoffed. You don't understand anything about business opportunities in today's economy. You have to take risks to get ahead. You can't just sit around waiting for success to fall into your lap. But your restaurant experience, I started remembering how she'd only worked as an administrator for a few months before Tommy was born. It was pretty brief, wasn't it? God, you're so boring. Amanda threw her hands up in exasperation. This is exactly why you're still single. Nellie, you never take any chances. I sat there pushing the remains of my dinner around my plate, listening to them spin their fantasy of success. Not once did they mention the possibility of failure, of things going wrong. Not once did they consider what would happen if their dream restaurant didn't work out. An hour later, I pulled into the driveway of my small house. Gran's house. Really, though, she'd been gone for 3 years now. As I unlocked the front door, my mind wandered back to her final days and how she'd divided her property between my sister and me. Amanda had practically camped out at Grant's hospital bed, going on and on about how perfect the luxury apartment would be for her future family. I remember Graham looking at me apologetically as she explained her decision to leave me the house instead. "You've always been practical, just like me," she'd said, squeezing my hand with what little strength she had left. "This house isn't fancy, but it's paid for and full of love. You'll appreciate its value more than anyone else could." Sitting in my cozy living room, now surrounded by grand old furniture that I couldn't bear to replace, I couldn't help but think about how history kept repeating itself with Amanda. The memory of her childhood tantrums came flooding back, the time she screamed for 2 hours straight because Mom bought her the wrong color bicycle, or when she threw herself on the floor of the mall because Dad wouldn't buy her a second pair of designer jeans. There was also that memorable Christmas when she refused to speak to anyone for 3 days because she got the previous year's iPhone model instead of the latest one. Our parents had not alone to whatever scheme she cooked up, praising her creativity and ambition while dismissing my concerns as negativity. Even when she dropped out of college because classes were boring and she wanted to find herself, they supported her decision wholeheartedly. I made myself a cup of tea in Gran's old porcelain cup, trying to push these thoughts aside. I had my own life to focus on. My job at Henderson Financial was demanding but rewarding, and I had a major project presentation coming up that could lead to a promotion. Our team was working on restructuring a client's investment portfolio, and I needed to be sharp. Amanda's restaurant dreams weren't my problem, and dwelling on them wouldn't change anything. But exactly 1 month later, my phone rang during my lunch break. Just as I was reviewing the final numbers for my presentation, Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a strange sense of foreboding. "Nellie, you won't believe it!" She practically squealed, her voice high with excitement. They did it. They sold the apartment and found the perfect location for the restaurant. It's right on Madison Street. You know where all those trendy places are? Mike is already working on the menu. He's got such wonderful ideas for fusion Italian cuisine. Can you imagine? And Amanda? Oh, you should see her Instagram posts about the restaurant. She's going to be such a successful businesswoman. She's already got over 1,000 followers for the restaurant page. I gripped my phone tighter, feeling my knuckles turn white. "Where are they living now?" "They found a nice rental," Mom replied breezily, as if they hadn't just sold their only real estate asset. "I'm watching Tommy and Lisa while they get everything set up. It's so exciting. They're talking about having a big grand opening party next month." I stared at the financial report on my desk, thinking about the massive risk my sister had just taken. The statistics about restaurant failures in their first year flashed through my mind. I'd looked them up after that dinner, and they weren't pretty. 2 months passed in a blur of work deadlines and quiet evenings at home before I received Amanda's message. The invitation popped up on my Instagram feed, an elaborate digital card with gold lettering announcing the grand opening of Bella Italia. I had to admit it looked professional. When I arrived at the address on Madison Street that Saturday evening, I was actually impressed. The storefront had been transformed with elegant lighting and window boxes full of fresh herbs. Inside, the decor was warm and inviting. Exposed brick walls, dark wood tables, and strings of twinkling lights crisscrossing the ceiling. "Nellie, you came." Amanda rushed over in a designer dress that probably cost more than a month's worth of rent. She kissed my cheeks, champagne glass wobbling in her hand. The place was packed with familiar faces, cousins, aunts, uncles, old family friends, and Mike's entire extended family. Mom and Dad were holding court near the bar, Dad's voice carrying across the room as he gestured enthusiastically. "Just wait and see," I overheard him telling Uncle Jim Amanda's going to be the next big name in the restaurant business. "She's got that entrepreneurial spirit, you know. Not like Nellie. She'll probably work for other people until she retires." Mom nodded along. "Some people are just born leaders, and others, well, they're more comfortable following." I pretended not to hear them as I made my way to the appetizer table. Their words didn't sting as much as they might have. Once I'd long ago accepted that I'd never be the daughter they bragged about at family gatherings. Congratulations, I told Amanda, sincerely raising my glass. The place looks beautiful. I hope it's a huge success. The next few months fell into a pattern. Every Sunday dinner at our parents' house became a progress report on Bella Italia. Amanda would sweep in sometimes with the kids, and Mike sometimes just with Tommy and Lisa in tow, and dominate the conversation with tales of her budding restaurant empire. That's our girl, Dad would beam. Always knew she had it in her, to be a successful entrepreneur. It's in her blood. Mom would inevitably chime in with, not everyone has that drive. Shooting meaningful glances my way. Amanda would smirk at me across the table. That same superior look she'd had since we were kids, and she'd gotten her way yet again. But one evening, when the conversation turned to actual numbers, I couldn't help myself. How's the revenue looking? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Are you hitting your projected targets? Amanda's smile faltered for a split second. Oh, you know how it is with new restaurants, she said, waving her hand dismissively. We're still building our customer base, but we'll be self-sufficient any day now. And then the profits will really start rolling in. Something in her voice made me think of a time in high school when she'd insisted everything was fine with her grades, right up until she failed 3 classes. But I kept that thought to myself and just nodded, taking another bite of Mom's pot roast. The spring evening started like any other Sunday dinner, with Mom's cooking, filling the house with familiar aromas, and Dad telling his same old jokes. Then Amanda cleared her throat and grabbed Mike's hand. We have some news, she announced, beaming. I'm pregnant. Baby number 3 is on the way. Mom burst into tears of joy. Dad started talking about another grandchild to spoil, and Mike sat there grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Tommy and Lisa jumped around the table chanting, baby, baby. I sat down my fork, choosing my words carefully. Are you sure this is the best timing, with the restaurant still getting established and everything? The room went silent. You'd think I just suggested selling Tommy and Lisa to the circus. Nellie! Mom's voice could have cut glass. How dare you, a baby is always a blessing. Besides, she added with that particular tone she reserved for discussing my personal life, you'd understand if you had any children of your own or a husband. You're 30 now, you know, not getting any younger. 8 months later, little Emily joined the family. She was beautiful, with Amanda's blue eyes and Mike's dark hair. But while everyone was cooing over the new additions, I couldn't help but notice the strange showing around my sister's eyes. The way Mike kept checking his phone with an increasingly worried expression, the truth finally came out 3 months after Emily's birth. During another family dinner, Amanda looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes visible despite her makeup, while Mike had traded his usual confident swagger for nervous fidgeting. We're having some challenges at the restaurant, Amanda admitted, pushing her food around her plate. The words seemed to physically paint her. The staff turnover is killing us. We've gone through 6 different head chefs because Mike keeps wanting to innovate with the menu. She took a shaky breath. We've had to take out a business loan just to keep things running. The numbers they're not what we projected. I sat there in silence, remembering all my questions about their business plan from that first dinner. The loan they should have taken instead of selling the apartment. The risks I had warned them about. But I didn't say any of it. The next 6 months were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Every week brought new problems at Bella Italia. First, the lunch crowd dwindled to nothing. Then the evening reservations started to dry up. The restaurant's Instagram page, once full of beautifully plated dishes and smiling customers, went quiet. The last post was a sad 2-for-1 Tuesday promotion that got 3 likes. I heard most of it through Mom's daily phone calls to update me on the situation, how they had to let go of half the staff, how they started closing on Mondays to cut costs, how Mike got into a shouting match with their last remaining chef over putting sushi rolls on their Italian menu. They're just having a rough patch. Mom would insist. Every new business goes through this. But it wasn't just a rough patch. By spring, the writing was on the wall in bright neon letters. The restaurant's debts had piled up like autumn leaves, unpaid suppliers, late rent mounting tax bills. The final blow came when their main investor pulled out, leaving them with no choice but to sell Bella Italia for a fraction of what they'd invested. The sale barely covered their business debts. They still owed the bank nearly $200,000 from a loan they'd taken out. Amanda, Mike, and their 3 kids, Tommy, Mel 8, Lisa 5, and little Emily, just turning 1, were left with nothing. No home, no income, and a mountain of debt. I almost skipped the next Saturday dinner. Something in Mom's voice when she called to remind me about it set off warning bells. But I went anyway, pulling up to their house just as the spring sun was setting. The atmosphere hit me the moment I walked in. Mom and Dad sat ramrod straight in their usual chairs. Amanda and Mike were there too, the kids playing quietly in the corner, unusually subdued for them. Emily was asleep in her carrier, while Tommy and Lisa seemed to sense the tension in the room, focusing intently on their tablets. I hadn't even settled properly into my chair when Dad cleared his throat. "Nellie, we've made a decision." The way he said we made my stomach clench. "Your sister and her family need a place to stay." Mom jumped in. "You have that big house all to yourself." I felt like I'd walked into an ambush. "What we need to move in with you," Amanda stated as if she was telling me the weather forecast temporarily. Of course my mouth went dry. How long is temporarily?" Amanda shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Probably her last professional manicure for a while. I thought hysterically. Hard to say. I can't work, obviously not with 3 small children to take care of, and Mike needs time to find the right position. "I'm not going to flip burgers somewhere," Mike interjected, puffing up his chest. "I was a business owner. I need something at an executive level, so we'll need to stay with you for a few years." Amanda continued as if discussing borrowing a cup of sugar. "It's not like you're using all that space anyway. And let's be honest, Nellie, you're not getting any younger. The chances of you getting married and having kids are getting pretty slim. You're already 30 and you spend all your time working." I sat there stunned into silence by my sister's breathtaking arrogance. The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air like poison, made worse by our parents' nodding heads. Mom and Dad were actually agreeing with her as if my single status and career somehow made me responsible for fixing their mistakes. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the leg scraping against the floor, with a harsh sound that made everyone jump. "No, what do you mean no?" Amanda asked, genuine confusion in her voice. The concept of me refusing her anything was apparently foreign to her. "I mean, no, you're not moving into my house." My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "Not for a few years, not for a few months, not at all." The silence that followed was deafening. I could actually hear the tick of Mom's ancient kitchen clock marking the second. Tommy and Lisa looked up from their tablets, sensing the tension in the room. Even baby Emily starred in her career. Then the explosion came. "How dare you!" Mom shrieked, her face turning red. "They're your family, your own flesh and blood, you selfish, heartless witch," Amanda joined in, tears already starting to flow. "My children will be homeless because of you." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "I never thought I raised such a cruel, uncaring daughter." "These are your nephews and niece we're talking about." "You've always been jealous of your sister," Mike added, wrapping an arm around my sobbing sister. "You're probably happy we failed." I let them rant, watching as they worked themselves into a righteous fury. The accusations flew thick and fast. I was heartless, cruel, selfish, bitter, jealous, a terrible aunt, a disappointment as a daughter, a failure as a woman. When they finally ran out of steam, I spoke, my voice still perfectly calm. "You know who could take them in." "You could. Mom and Dad, since you supported their brilliant business plans so enthusiastically, since you cheered them on when they sold their only home. Since you told them what a wonderful idea it all was." Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Dad started to sputter something about their house being too small, but I cut him off. "I warned you all." I continued, reaching for my coat. "I warned you about selling the apartment. I warned you about starting a business without a proper plan. I warned you about the risks. Not one of you listened. Not one of you even considered that I might know what I was talking about. And now that everything I predicted has come true, you expect me to clean up your mess?" I buttoned my coat with steady hands. "You made your decisions, all of you. You chose not to listen to reason. You chose to ignore every warning sign. You chose to risk everything on a dream with no foundation. And now you're facing the consequences of those choices." I walked out into the cool evening air, closing the door on their protests. As I got into my car, I could still hear them shouting through the windows, their voices a chorus of outrage and disbelief. The harassment started within hours of me leaving my parents' house. First came the guilt trip text from Mom. "How can you sleep at night knowing your nieces and nephew might end up homeless?" Then Dad's angry voicemails about family duty and responsibility. Amanda alternated between tearful pleas and vicious attacks, while Mike sent long, rambling messages about how I was destroying his children's future. I blocked their numbers after the first week, but they just switched to email, then social media. Then they started having other family members contact me, and Susan called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Cousin Rachel sent me a 5-paragraph Facebook message about how karma would get me. Uncle Jim cornered me outside my office to lecture me about family values. I weathered it all, focusing on my work and the peace of my home. But I wasn't naive. I knew my family well enough to know they wouldn't just accept my refusal. That's why I'd called a locksmith. The very next day after that disastrous dinner, the locks were changed. A security system was installed and cameras were placed at strategic points around the house. Smart thinking. As it turned out, I was driving home from work one Wednesday evening when I saw them. Amanda, Mike, and the kids were camped out on my front porch, surrounded by suitcases and boxes. Tommy was sitting on a large duffel bag looking bored. Lisa was crying and Emily was fussy, and her carrier Mike was jiggling my doorknob with what I assumed was my mother's spare key. I pulled into my driveway and got out of my car, unable to suppress a laugh at the scene before me. They all turned at the sound. "Something funny," Mike snarled, still trying to force the key into the lock. "Actually, yes," I replied, leaning against my car. "Did you really think I wouldn't change the locks after that dinner? The alarm systems. Nice too. It's already sent 3 notifications to my phone about attempted entry." Amanda stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "You can't just leave us out here. We're your family. You're trespassing," I corrected her. "And if you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." I pulled out my phone to demonstrate I wasn't bluffing. "You wouldn't dare," Mike growled, taking a threatening step toward me. I held up my phone, showing them the 911 already dialed, my thumb hovering over the call button. "Try me." They stared at me for a long moment, probably searching for any sign of weakness or uncertainty. They found none. Finally, Amanda burst into tears. Real ones this time, not her usual performance, and started gathering up their things. Mike helped her, muttering threats under his breath. The kids just looked confused and tired. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day visiting rental properties in decent neighborhoods, finally finding a clean, spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district. The landlord was understandably hesitant about renting to a family with 3 young kids, but the 6 months' rent I paid in advance, nearly $20,000 from my savings, helped change his mind. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, the apartment keys feeling heavy in my pocket. It was early, but I knew they'd all be there. They always gathered for Saturday breakfast, a tradition that used to include me too. The room fell silent when I walked in. Mom nearly dropped the pancake plate and Dad's newspaper crinkled as his hands tightened on it. "Here," I said, placing the keys in a folder on the table. "It's a 3-bedroom apartment on Cedar Street. Good neighborhood, walking distance to the elementary school. I paid 6 months' rent in advance." Amanda stared at the keys like they might bite her. Mike didn't even look up from his phone. "The lease starts today," I continued, my voice steady. "I've already talked to the landlord. He knows you have 3 kids. There's a playground in the complex, and the building has a laundry room on each floor." I turned to Mike specifically. "You have 6 months to find a job. Any job. Pride doesn't pay bills or feed children. When the lease ends, you'll need to either renew it yourselves or find another place. This is the only help I'm offering." Nobody spoke. Tommy and Lisa had stopped fighting over the syrup and were watching with wide eyes. Even Emily seemed to sense the tension. Her tiny hand passed midway to her mouth with a piece of pancake. "That's it," Amanda finally asked, her voice bitter. "You think throwing money at us makes up for turning your back on family?" I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The entitled teenager who always got her way had grown into an entitled adult who never learned to face consequences. "No," I replied calmly. "The money doesn't make up for anything. It's just the right thing to do. What happens next is up to you." Mom started to say something, probably another lecture about family duty, but I held up my hand. "I'm done. I helped because those kids deserve a stable home. But I'm not enabling this behavior anymore. You all made your choices. Now you have to live with them." I left without waiting for a response. As I drove home, I caught myself smiling. Not because I was happy about the situation, but because for the first time in my life, I felt truly free of their expectations and manipulation. 3 months have passed since then, according to Aunt Susan, who still talks to me, albeit disapprovingly. Amanda and her family are living in the apartment I rented. Mike still hasn't found a job. Apparently, being a former restaurant owner makes him too good for regular work. Amanda spends most of her time complaining on social media about how hard her life is. Mom and Dad continue to enable them watching the kids and bringing them groceries. I haven't spoken to any of them since that morning. I've started taking evening classes in investment management, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the emotional energy for before. Last week, I got a promotion at work, senior financial manager, with my own team.